Hello, guten Tag. So we have some breaking news right now that just broke, and it is a story about a bipartisan gun reform bill that has been announced. There has been like a bipartisan 2010-10 split Democrat-Republican committee that has been going on for the past like 2 weeks, and they've basically been debating gun reforms. And so now we have a big announcement that there's a bipartisan agreement on gun reform. Now, as you guys know, 99% of the time bipartisan bills suck. Usually it's because like both parties will be very impacted by corporations, like the war lobby or whatever. And so anytime there's a bipartisan bill, it's because they come together to basically screw over people and just side with their donors. So usually bipartisan bills suck. This one also kind of sucks, but it's really, depending on the scope that you look at this. I mean, this is the biggest gun legislation in decades that's going to be passed. Maybe since like the assault weapons ban. There's some important things that are being passed here, but it comes nowhere close to enough. And I'll break down for you what exactly is going on. And the senators announced bipartisan agreement on gun proposals. A bipartisan group of 20 senators led by Senators Chris Murphy and John Cornyn on Sunday announced that they have agreed to a common sense proposal to curb gun violence in response to the mass shooting in Uvalde, Texas, that left 21 people dead at Robb Elementary School. In a major development, 10 Republicans signed on to the bipartisan framework, which means any legislation based on its principles has a good chance of mustering 60 votes and overcoming a filibuster on the Senate floor. So if you guys don't know I think a lot of you guys don't know what a filibuster is. It's basically just like this blocking tactic that you can use to actually prevent a bill from even being voted on. It's like this weird loophole where it's like, oh, okay, if you want to vote on that bill, you need 60 votes to actually vote on it. So you have to get cloture. Cloture is the ending of debate on a bill. And if you don't have those 60 votes, then technically you're debating the bill forever. So it's a good way. It's like, it's really hard to get 60 votes. You can change the rule with 50 votes, but, Democrats often won't be for that. Then there's like another thing you can do, which is like budget reconciliation, which you can do to, try to make it a bill pass so that it's supposed to match the budget and blah, blah, blah. But, that's what it is. So you need 60 votes to pass anything unless the Democrats would be willing to overcome the filibuster by using their 50 votes. But Joe Manchin and I think Sinema are pretty clear that they wouldn't support that. And so they don't have enough votes to actually end the filibuster. So these 10 Republicans signing on, assuming that Manchin or Sinema doesn't go against this bill, which would be pretty crazy if they did, they would have enough to be able to pass it because they could get through that 60 filibuster. It says President Biden applauded the deal, which he said would be the most significant gun safety legislation to pass Congress in decades, and pledged to sign it. The 9-point bipartisan plan would send federal resources to set up red flag laws to keep guns out of the hands of people deemed dangerous to the community, invest billions of dollars in children and family mental health services, fund school-based mental health services, fund new safety measures at schools, and strengthen criminal background check requirements for gun buyers younger than 21. Today we are announcing a common sense bipartisan proposal to protect America's children, keep our schools safe, and reduce the threat of violence across our country, the lawmakers said in a joint statement released shortly before noon Sunday. And so it just basically goes on to talk about it. I think none of the Republicans on the committee are actually facing election. So that's pretty interesting. Another interesting thing is Mitch McConnell saying that he's in favor of it. He says, I continue to hope their discussions yield a bipartisan product that makes significant headway on key issues like mental health and school safety, respects the Second Amendment, earns broad support in the Senate, and makes a difference for our country. So there's some issues with this, but I'll break down for you what exactly this bill is doing. So this proposal includes support for state crisis intervention orders, provides resources to states and tribes to create and administer laws that help ensure deadly weapons are kept out of the hands of individuals whom a court is determined to be a significant danger to themselves or others, consistent with state and federal due process and constitutional protections. So you're going to have, the availability of, if a court deems somebody to be an unsafe person for firearm ownership, there will be support for making sure that that person doesn't get the firearm. A lot of this is going to end up on the state and local level is what it looks like, man. So a lot of stuff is going to be hard to really be able to actually put into action. It says investment in children and family mental health services. National expansion of community behavioral health center model, major investments to increase access to mental health and suicide prevention programs and other support services available in the community, including crisis and trauma intervention and recovery. So a big theme in this you're going to see is the mental health aspect of this. Mental health is a huge issue in the United States, and our lack of funding, especially, Reagan did a lot of bad stuff as governor in California, where he reversed Jimmy Carter's past plan that allowed more funding for mental health. So this is something that's important, but at the same time, I'm not really sure it's going to be a real solution to the gun problem. Now, I'm not convinced necessarily. It kind of feels like you're kind of skirting the issue a bit. Here it says protections for victims of domestic violence. This is going to be a big one for women, actually. It says convicted domestic violence abusers and individuals subject to domestic violence restraining orders are included in NICS, including those who have ever had a continuing relationship of a romantic or intimate nature. So this is interesting because there's something I just learned about this called the boyfriend loophole. I didn't know about this, but basically it's called the boyfriend loophole because currently domestic abusers are only barred from firearm ownership if they're in a married relationship or living with a child or something like that. But if you're just dating and you're abusive, you're domestically abusive in a dating relationship, you're not barred from owning a firearm. So you'll be able to, the law will be able to bar men who are domestic abusers in relationships from purchasing a firearm, even if they're just dating, which is a big deal. That's a big deal for the safety of women. So that's definitely one of the biggest things you can see here. The support for state crisis intervention orders is something that can do some stuff, but I'm not sure how deep it's going to go. Just because it's having all the court orders and all that stuff haven't happened. I just don't know how effective that's going to end up being. That's a lot of bureaucracy and stuff going on. But obviously there's rights at hand, and so it's difficult to do. That's why it's kind of better to tackle the gun issue itself, I would say. Another one says funding for school-based mental health and supportive services, invest in programs to expand mental health and supportive services in schools, including early identification and intervention programs, school-based mental health and wraparound services. So again, another mental health aspect. Again, mental health is something that's very important and we don't have enough coverage for, so that's good. This may, if they're looking for these kinds of early signs, maybe it can be a good thing. I'm not sure. There doesn't appear to be, I don't know if there's any specific gun-related mental health issues that are being here, allowing therapists to hear a kid say that he has a thoughts intrusive thoughts or thoughts about some kind of bad thing, and then they're able to tell them without them having to tell the police or something like that. I don't know. Another one says funding for school safety resources. This is whack. Investment programs help institute safety measures in and around primary and secondary schools, support school violence prevention efforts, and provide training to school personnel and students. This is probably one of the the concessions, I guess, made by Democrats on here. This is again the thing where you're trying to arm schools basically into war zones in order to prevent this stuff, where you just have a bunch of guns and stuff present at schools. Just completely whack BS, totally wrong way of solving the issue. So I'm not in favor of that. Clarification of definition of federally licensed firearms dealer cracks down on criminals who illegally evade licensing requirements. So this is going to be an important one. This is clarification. I'm not, I guess it's for people who are, it's going to change the licensing requirements for people who sell firearms is what it looks like, to include people who sell more. It says telehealth investments, investor programs that increase access to mental and behavioral health services for youth and families in crisis via telehealth. Ever since coronavirus, telehealth has really blown up, so I think that's going to continue as well. It's obviously healthcare through the phone. Talk to your doctor. I have, a painful, pimp on my butt. Can you help me? Or you have, your therapist appointment or whatever. You can talk on the phone. So, another one. It says here. Sorry, I already looked at that one. Under 21 enhanced review process. So this is going to be a big one relating to the Uvalde situation. It says for buyers under 21 years of age, requires an investigative period to review juvenile and mental health records, including checks with state databases and local law enforcement. So this is the thing, right? So we're not getting the 21-year-old requirement that we wanted, right, for purchasing a AR-15. You want to raise the age of those machine gun purchases to 21. You want universal background checks. These are some of the common sense regulations that you you want. We're not really getting any of them, but at least I guess there's the boyfriend loophole being closed. There's this that supposedly do something, but again, something like this even, bro, I'm not even really sure how much this is really going to do, because honestly, in a lot of these states and areas, the background checks aren't actually going to be anything. They won't actually do anything. It's kind of like when, the NFL says they're going to investigate Deshaun Watson and then they don't actually do anything, or, the FBI says they're investigating Brett Kavanaugh about the whole allegations against him, then they do nothing. That's kind of the tough part about all of this stuff. But like with the Uvalde guy, was there anything that would have been able to really tip anything off specifically that was a record? I'm not sure 100%. But it's not the universal background check, but I guess it's something for the under 21 enhanced review process. You also have penalties for straw purchasing, cracks down on criminals who illegally straw purchase and traffic guns. So I believe straw purchasing is there's regulations on purchasing a firearm, and so instead of you buying it yourself in violation of the limit, you go to your friend and say, hey bro, I'll give you $100 or whatever, go buy this for me. And so I guess they're going to crack down on straw purchasing. Dinesh D'Souza he was actually locked up for straw donations. I don't know if he was really locked up. He probably just bailed out. But, he basically was giving his mistress money to donate to another candidate after he had already reached the limit. And so that's obviously illegal. You're only allowed to donate like $2,700 to a campaign. But you can't like give $2,700 to someone else. Like, hey, bro, donate this. Like, that's your money. That's called a straw donation. So that's something else that's going to be cracked down on. So those are the provisions in the bill. The Speaker Nancy Pelosi called the agreement a step forward, but vowed to continue fighting for more aggressive gun control measures that passed the House this week. So this is very weak, no doubt. I would say easily the biggest thing. Closing the boyfriend loophole is obviously huge. That's a big deal for sure. It's going to result in a lot more protections for women. Also, the enhanced background check one is a big deal, and some of the other stuff may do some things, but no universal background checks, no 21 year old requirement, and no real cracking down on gun existence of the guns themselves and stuff like that. So it doesn't go anywhere close to far enough, and it shouldn't be surprising. I mean, it's a bipartisan bill. Bipartisan bills suck like 99% of the time. So whether or not you support this as somebody who supports gun reform, I say you should support this, because this is literally the biggest gun legislation in 40 years, I would say. And it's something, the fact that there's anything going on, I think is a big deal. And at that point, I mean, you just kind of have to be a pragmatist. At that point, you just kind of have to go with it, because I don't really know what other options you have at this point, what other options you have. If you don't get this, I mean, you're going to get nothing. And so your choice essentially is this or nothing. Pretty much, especially because there's a red wave coming. So if you don't do this now, the red wave is about to come, and you're about to just have just red cream just all over you after these midterms. So you'll have no chance to get literally anything done. But anyways, not anywhere close to what we need for gun reform, but I guess it's something. So, let me know your thoughts down below. We got breaking news. Bipartisan senators bill, 20 bipartisan senators, 10 Republicans, 10 Democrats. 10 Republicans, obviously important, because that 10 gives you enough to break the filibuster, the 60-vote filibuster, so you can get through the vote to end debate and to go into voting. So that's a big deal, obviously. And so, yeah, man, let me know what your thoughts are down below.